So even though Richard Rios is one of my favourite players to watch aesthetically, and I'd love to see him get a move to Europe, for Manchester United I just don't think he's the right signing, and this is because I think at the moment his style of play is far better suited to South American football than it is European football, let alone the Premier League. In terms of what Rios' best attributes are, in possession he's far more of a dribbler than a passer, and we can see this reflected in the plot graphs I'm going to show you throughout this video when compared against every other central midfielder in the Brazilian top league. Now the sample size is rather small because the Brazilian league only started at the start of the year, but what you can see is that in the just under 700 minutes that Rios has played, he ranks highly as an outlier for both his ball carrying frequency and his successful dribbles per 90, which you would expect from the eye test, as well as Rios' background in futsal. However, in just a minute I'm going to explain why Rios may find it hard to translate this futsal influenced style to the Premier League. But this next plot graph highlights my initial concerns with the Rios transfer, as despite completing a high amount of dribbles per 90, his dribble success rate is significantly lower, actually sitting just below the median, which as an attacking midfielder or winger may not be as much of an issue, but for a high volume dribbling central midfielder, there is a greater risk of losing the ball when attempting a dribble, purely because of the area of the pitch you are likely to lose a ball in, which I could see being a big issue in the Premier League, as if you watch South American football frequently, you'll notice that the game is played very differently, but you've maybe not been able to put your finger on exactly what the difference is and why it occurs. And so along with that, in this video I'm going to continue to analyse why I think going straight from Brazil to the Premier League could significantly hamper Rios' game, specifically analysing how the difference in style will affect his game, then showing you some other plot graphs from some of Rios' other metrics, before towards the end I give some examples of players for around the same price or even cheaper who I think would be far better options for United to target. And I'll also do a separate video looking at some more underrated players who could be Rios alternatives as well. But before I get into that, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including the new Manchester United releases for the upcoming season. They sent me over this Manchester United 2006-2007 white away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, as well as this Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well, just two of the many retro shirts they have in stock. If you use code Alanders at checkout you will get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comment section below. So in South America the intensity and pressure is significantly lower than in Europe, and not just in the Premier League, and a major factor for this is that South American teams seem to be a lot less focused on the vertical and horizontal compactness in their pressing and defensive shapes, and prefer to have their backline drop off rather than looking to squeeze up the pitch to congest the space between the lines, as we do see frequently in Europe. And so the result of this is that when someone like Richard Rios receives the ball in the Brazilian league, even in the centre of the pitch, it's almost as if he's in a 1v1 with the opposition central midfielder, due to the amount of space around that player, caused by the reduced vertical and horizontal compactness that we see in the defensive and pressing shapes domestically in South America. Whilst in Brazil Rios can receive possession, and sometimes he has time to put his studs on the ball in the centre of the pitch or shift the ball from one foot to the other, looking to entice a pressing player into committing to a challenge before then beating him in the 1v1. In Europe and specifically the Premier League, the increased compactness of the defensive shapes alongside the significantly higher physical and athletic intensity levels means that Rios is not going to have this sort of time and space to do this, and because he's dribbling but also his possession style in general is heavily based on being able to hold on to the ball and draw the pressing player into him, I think this stylistic difference could significantly reduce the effectiveness of the best part of his game. And even over a bigger sample size, close to 1,800 minutes that he played in the Brazilian Serie A in 2024, you can see from his FBref report that he isn't putting up huge take-on or ball-carrying numbers, only around the 65th to 75th percentile range, actually ranking higher for the amount of take-ons he attempts, whilst also ranking very low, just the 13th percentile, for his take-on success rate, which adds further statistical weight to my argument. Now I previously showed you this graph that shows him ranking fairly lowly for his dribble success rate, but also if you compare his progressive pass accuracy percentage against his possession won lost rate per 90, you can see that he ranks lower than the median for both of these metrics, with the median being this dotted line. And this is in the Brazilian league, so translate this to the Premier League. Because of the intensity of the individual players and the reduced time and space Rios will have, this is already a weakness in his game which could be exacerbated further. Now Rios certainly isn't only a dribbler, As out of possession, he does have that typical South American tenacity and aggression, combined with the upper body and quad strength to be able to adapt physically to the Premier League, being someone who is fairly quick across the ground and is able to break up play with robust standing tackles. However, I don't think that his defensive output is good enough or high volume enough in order to overshadow the potential retention issues that he could have in possession, with this graph showing that whilst he does rank slightly higher than the median for his defensive duels 1 per 90, you can see that he ranks well below the median for the percentage of duels he wins, and from the eye test you can understand why, as well as Rios' aggression and tenacity. When moving to engage a player with the ball is impressive, he does have a similar problem to Agate, but doesn't have the high volume defensive output in order to make up for it, and that is that Rios does have a tendency to overcommit, fly in too quickly, leave himself flat-footed, and therefore bypass too easily, which could be a major issue when playing in Amorim's 3-4-3 due to having one less midfielder in the central part of the pitch. Now, Rios could be effective for United against deeper defensive blocks, usually when United are chasing a goal and are consistently pushing the opposition back into their defensive third, as his futsal influence technical ability could make him a valuable asset in wider areas, when looking to link play and progress the ball into the box in these congested tight areas with the likes of Ahmad, Bruno and Cunha. However, given his likely price tag of around £20 to £25 million, I just don't see him being worth the price, as I think the effectiveness of his best attributes are going to be significantly reduced in the Premier League, due to these stylistic differences and his limitations in terms of ball retention being highlighted to a greater extent than they are now. I think he'd be better off with a move to Spain or Portugal, where the intensity he'll be up against will be lower than the Premier League and will suit his game more, giving him a much easier adaptation period to European football. And so overall, I just don't see where Rios' best role would be, not just in Amorim's 3-4-3, but in most systems in general in the Premier League, as whilst he certainly has the ability to score a spectacular goal from range, or pull off a dribble or a piece of flair that catches the eye, I don't think his overall game is efficient enough to warrant that sort of price, because for £20 to £25 million, United could get Hayden Hackney, whose skill set is not only far better suited to the Premier League, but also to playing in Amorim's midfield double pivot, being significantly better than Rios when it comes to his progressive passing and retention, and probably also his ball carrying as well. There's also Maxi Oyedele as an option, who would be available for his release clause of just £5 million, and from the eye test alone, I think you can see that not only is Oyedele far better suited to the physicality and the intensity of the Premier League, I also think he's superior when it comes to his progressive passing and ball retention, which we can see statistically in these graphs. Now, because you can't access these plot graphs for free, I will upload them to my Patreon for the bottom tier, covering some different positions, leagues, players, things like that, and so you can give me some suggestions on what sort of plot graphs you want to see. You can get a 7-day free trial just to check it out, so I'll leave my Patreon linked in the description, comment section, eye above, and on the end screen after the video. So whilst in the Brazilian league, Rios was ranking below the median for both his progressive passing accuracy and for his possessions 1 loss rate per 90, Maxi Oyedele in the Polish league stands out as an outlier, sitting towards the top right of the plot graph and well above the median for both metrics. For defensive duels 1 per 90 plotted against a percentage, you can see that unlike Richard Rios, Oyedele ranks above the median for both, and despite not being as prolific a dribbler or a ball carrier as Rios, ranking below the median for his ball carrying frequency in Poland, his passing is certainly the better part of his game, ranking above the median for both his progressive passes, adjusted for possession, and his accurate passes into the final third, whilst for the same metrics on the plot graph, Rios in the Brazilian league ranks below the median for both, lending weight to my theory that Rios' performance level is highly dependent on his ball carrying and dribbling output, which I just can't see him effectively translating to the Premier League, considering how low his dribble success rate is already in Brazil. Maybe after 2 to 3 years time at a team like Porto or Benfica in the Portuguese league, then Rios might have adapted and then be ready for a move to the Premier League. I don't think he's the right option for United in the present, especially with Hayden Hackney being a far better all-round option for around the same price, and Oyedele also in my opinion being a better option at the same price, but considering he would cost just 20 to 25% of what Rios would, I can't see why United would prioritise Rios over just bringing back Oyedele or targeting Hackney instead. So let me know if you would sign Richard Rios for Manchester United this summer. And if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for 10% off. It will be linked in the description and comment section below. And if you want to check out any of the plot graphs or any of my articles or get access to the Instagram discussion group chat, I'll leave my Patreon linked on the end screen now.